In this lesson, we're going to take our list that we created in a previous video and turn it into some horizontal navigation. We have our list that we've created using the list feature in properties, and it's just a matter of writing some rules. Many of the properties might not make sense until we get more into floating and clearing and understanding what those mean. But if you can take a look at the PDF files that were provided on Blackboard and just really think of those like a recipe, the rules, the properties, everything that you need will be in there. So just follow along for now and watch, really just take in the amount of rules and properties that need to be written. As a reminder, my div box is called list box. So I am going to begin by grabbing a little bit of one of the links, moving over to my CSS styles, and I will create a new CSS rule. I'm going to come down to the compound. That's going to help me write a lot of this rule. And if you just watched the previous video, which talked about the creation of the vertical list, I don't need all of this information right now. I need to start out really general and then work specifically to this last item, the link. So for this first rule, I just need list box and UL. Alright, so all I need here is to come to the box category and eliminate any padding, any margin. The other thing I need to do that might not make a whole lot of sense is to say that I want this to float to the left. And I will go ahead and hit apply. And you can see that, yeah, I don't have any margin, I don't have any padding. My bulleted list is kind of hanging out here, but we'll eliminate that in just a second. The next rule that we need to add to our recipe to make this list horizontal is what's called inline. And it's going to take all of these sitting one on top of each other and take them from that vertical status, and in line means sitting next to each other. So the rule that we write for each list item is really just a short one property rule. So let's go ahead and do that. Selecting just a little of that word, the link, coming to CSS styles. This should be looking very familiar to you by now. And as a reminder, starting out in compound when you have kind of some complex stuff going on. So the rule I'm writing now is just describing the individual list items in the list in this div tag. And as I mentioned, it's just a one property. In the block category, we are going to say to display inline. And that's it. It doesn't really look like much for now, but as we add some future rules, it will. And in fact, part of what was impeding that from happening is the width of my box wasn't wide enough to let these links sit next to each other. So I'm increasing the width. You can see already we're on the right track there. So the final rules are the ones that will give the actual personality, the color, the styling, if you will. So only two more rules and we'll be done with this navigation. So a little bit highlighted, just as before, create a new rule, cruise right down to compound, and this is the rule we want. We're describing what a link would look like, and these are all links, if they are list items which are part of lists which are part of this div tag. Okay, well, one thing that you have to have in there before you start customizing and making this look like your own choices will be in the box category, float to the left. All right. As I mentioned before, just really think about this like a recipe. There are certain properties that you have to have in here, and the ones we've addressed so far, the floating to the left, the inline on the previous rule, the elimination of the margin and padding, and the floating left, those are all mandatory. What we do now from this point forward are your own custom choices. So most of those will take place in the type category. Perhaps you've chosen a different color, you choose not to have the links underlined. You may decide that these links are too close together, and they definitely are that, so I'll move to the box category, and using my margin, I'll just put in some margin on the left to push those apart. Now, one thing you'll notice in our example is that we have this pipe, this border separating them. That's a really common sort of HTML thing that you see a lot. Well, rather than using the key on the keyboard, we can build that in through CSS. So I'm going to go to the border category, and I'm going to choose, of course, to note that the border doesn't go all the way around. It's really just on one side. So on the right hand side, I will create a solid 1 pixel, and just to speed things along, I'm just picking a color. Alright, so there's our pipe, if you will. And of course it's a little bit too close to our word. So back to the box category, throw in a little bit of padding on the right. And there we go. So the spacing might not be exact, but you get the idea that we started from a vertical list, and we were able to, through the power of CSS, change that into horizontal navigation. Of course, a final step might be to add the additional rule of hover, and for that I'm simply just tacking on hover to the end of the line of a new rule. And maybe my change will be not only a color one, but perhaps a change in weight. You know, it's endless the things that you could do. So going up into live view and testing that out. Okay, so there we have our horizontal navigation.